The Dark Ages, an age of superstition, ignorance, and the destruction of science, where the church ruled by faith and made her effort to destroy science. Was that real? Was it, is this dark ages of superstition actually something real, or is more of a propaganda made by the Protestants and the illustratives and the Enlightenment? Is it is it that, or is actually something real? Well, as with all things, history is complicated, and is usually both sides are usually right in a way. But right now we will look at the relationship with the Catholic Church and science. And we will say that the Dark Ages they were not a period of time where science was persecuted by the Church, nor a dark age. Quite the opposite, actually. So I will use the books of how the church built the West and Galileo goes to jail. Now, the Renaissance, the Carolingian Renaissance. It spawned from the realm of Charlemagne to that of his son, Louis the Pious. Perhaps the key intellectual figure of the Carolingian Renaissance was the Anglo-Saxon Alucin of York. He played a crucial role in the Carolingian Renaissance. His knowledge of Latin allowed the study of both the Church Fathers and the world of classical antiquity. To be precise, the oldest copies of Roman literature that have reached us date back to the 9th century, when Carolingian intellectuals rescued them from oblivion. People are not always aware, says Kenneth Clark, that currently there are only three or four ancient manuscripts of Latin authors. Our entire knowledge of ancient literature is due to a compilation and transcription work initiated during the reign of Charlemagne, and almost all of the classical texts that managed to survive until the 8th century are still alive today. And after the death of Charlemagne, the initiative to spread knowledge gradually fell upon the Church. Local councils called for the establishment of schools, as did the Synod of Bavaria and the Councils of Chalons and Aix. Teodolfo, a friend of Alcuin, Bishop of Orleans, and Abbot of Fleury, similarly sponsored the expansion of education. The priest will open schools in towns and cities. If any of the faithful entrust their children to them to learn letters, they will not refuse to instruct these pupils with absolute clarity. The priest will undertake this task without asking for any payment, and if they receive any, they will not accept from the parents more than small tokens of gratitude. Monks also engaged in teaching, with varying degrees of intensity throughout the centuries. Saint John Chrysostom tells us that even in his time, approximately the 4th century, it was a custom among the people of Antioch to send their children to be educated by monks. Saint Benedict instructed the sons of Roman nobles. Saint Boniface established a school in each of the monasteries he founded in Germany, while Saint Augustine and his monks built schools in England and the places where the congregation was established. The monks did much more than preserve reading and writing. Even a historian not particularly friendly to monastic education acknowledged that they studied the songs of pagan poets and the writings of historians and philosophers. Monasteries and monastic schools experienced a great flourishing, and each house became a center of teaching and religious life. Another chronicle, not favorable to monks, not only did they create schools and became teachers, but they laid the foundations of universities. They were the thinkers and philosophers of the time and shaped political and religious thought. To them, both individually and collectively, is owed the survival of thought and the civilization from the classical world throughout the Middle Ages and the modern period. Once a student had obtained their university diploma and before answering the teaching license, they were required to have studied in Paris or another university the following words in Aristotle: physics on generation and corruption, on the heavens, and parva naturalia, treatises on sensation and the sensible, on sleep and wakefulness, on memory and recollection, on longevity and shortness of life, and also the metaphysics, or have attended two classes of the mathematical works of the Greek philosopher. They also had to read the mandatory readings, achieve mastery once the first diploma was obtained. Texts on the liberal art, such as Priscian, Aristotle's Rhetoric or Boethius Topics, or Cicero's De Inventione, or Ovid Metamorphoses, and Virgil's Poetic, on interpretation, or Boethius Topics, or the prior analytics or Aristotle Topics, Boethius in geometry, or Euclid or Alhazen, or Vitello's perspective. In astronomy, either Theoria Planetarum or Ptolemy Almagest. In natural philosophy, physics, or on generation, or on the properties of the elements or meteorology, or on plants and vegetables, or any of the parva naturalia. In moral philosophy, Aristotle ethics or politics, and in metaphysics, the metaphysics of Aristotle. So as you can see, their curriculum was pretty good actually. They had to study a lot of the ancient Greeks. Not only they recovered that teaching, but they also studied and teach it. Now, the Parens Censitarum in 1231, Gregory IX promulgated the Bulls Parens Centiarum in favor of the Masters of Paris. This document effectively granted the University of Paris the right to self-governance and empowered it to establish its own rules regarding studies and courses. With this document, writes a historian, the university reaches its majority and appears in legal history as a fully formed intellectual corporation, destined for academic formation and development. The papacy and Serge and other specialists should be considered a major force when forging the autonomy of the Paris Guild. And of course, many great thinkers and philosophers appeared in scholasticism, which was the, the age of the philosophy of the church. Scholasticism was a very important movement before the Enlightenment. You can find characters such as Thomas Aquinas, Francisco de Suarez, William of Ockham, Peter Abelard, many great and important philosophers in history. I mean, William of Ockham is considered to be the father of nominalism. Thomas Aquinas is considered to be the greatest thinker in all of scholasticism, and one that developed the teachings of Aristotle, but to an even greater level than he. And of course, Suarez and Abelard, they are extremely important regarding questions of the Aristotelians. So all of them, they had a tremendous uh, importance in the history of philosophy, especially Aquinas. Now, the flat Earth. Did the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, did people think that the Earth was flat? Did the Church thought that? Well, among the early Church fathers, such as Augustine and Jerome and Ambrose, who lived in the 3rd century, they all agreed that the Earth was a sphere. And from the 7th century to the 14th century, every significant medieval thinker concerned with the natural world asserted in one way or another that the world was a sphere. For example, Thomas Aquinas followed Aristotle's proof to demonstrate that the changing positions of constellations as they moved across the Earth's surface indicated the spherical shape of the Earth. Roger Bacon, in his work Oppius Maius, stated that the world was round. The southern antipodes were inhabited and the sun's passage along the ecliptic affected the climages of different parts of the world. Albertus Magnus agreed with Bacon's finding, while Michael Scotus, another very important philosopher of the scholastic period, compared the Earth surrounded by water to the yolk of an egg and the spheres of the universe to the layers of an onion. Perhaps the most influential were Jean de Sacrobosco, whose De Sphera demonstrated that the Earth was a sphere, and Pierre de Halley, Archibald of Cambrai, whose Image Mundi discussed the sphericity of the Earth, while the Halley's book was read by early explorers like Columbus. Now, Giordano Bruno and Galileo. The Catholic Church did not impose direct control over the thoughts of astronomers, and even Galileo was allowed to believe what he wished about the position and mobility of the Earth, as long as he did not teach the Copernican hypothesis as a truth that was irrelevant to sacred scriptures. However, the second part of this issue is clouded by the surviving documentation of Bruno's trials and the interrogations by both the Venetian and Roman inquisitors, revealing a persistent concern by Bruno's inquisitors about his ideas that there might be countless worlds similar to Earth inhabited in a universe made infinite by the power and reach of God. Now, as a mere philosophical speculation, the plurality of words had little significance for theologians after the Council of Trent. However, as a truth, it would undermine the central teaching of the Christian faith. Jerome Langford, one of the most sensible experts in the field today, provided a very useful summary of Galileo's stance in this regard. Galileo was convinced of knowing the truth, although objectively he lacked evidence to win the support of open-minded individuals. It is clear injustice to claim, as some historians do, that nobody wanted to hear his arguments, that he was never given a chance. Jesuit astronomers had confirmed his discoveries and eagerly waited the finding of new evidence that would allow them to abandon Tycho's system and rigorously defended the Copernicus model. Many influential clearly believed that Galileo could be right. However, they needed more data. Now, leaving teaching and philosophy aside, the church also supported a lot in the agriculture. At the beginning of the 20th century, Henry Goodell, the president of what was then known as the Massachusetts Agricultural College, praised the effort of these great monks of the past. Over 1500 years, it was they who saved agriculture at a time when no one else could have done it. They practiced it in the context of a new life and conditions when no one would have dared to undertake this venture. Similar testimonials abound in this regard. We owe to the monks the recovery of agriculture in much of Europe, notes another expert. Wherever they went, adds a third, they transformed virgin lands into crops, engaged in livestock, breeding and agricultural tasks, worked with their own hands, drained swamps, and cleared forests. Thanks to their efforts, Germany became a productive country. Another historian points out that Benedictine monasteries were an agricultural university for the region in which they were located. Even in the 19th century, the French statesman and historian Francois Quissot, a man not particularly sympathetic to the Catholic Church, remarked, "The Benedictine monks were the farmers of Europe. They transformed extensive areas of the continent into cultivable lands, associating agriculture with prayer." The contribution of monks to medieval technology is also noteworthy. The Cistercian order, originating from a reform of the rule of Saint Benedictine, was established in Citeaux in 1998 and is particularly known for its technological sophistication. Information was disseminated rapidly through the extensive communication network that existed among various monasteries. Similarly, hydraulic systems are observed in centers sometimes separated by thousands of kilometers. These monasteries, says a historian, were the most efficient economic units that had existed in Europe, and perhaps in the world up to that date. The Cistercian monastery of Clairvaux has left us a chronicle of its hydraulic system in the 12th century, provided an account of the astonishing machinery of medieval Europe. The Cistercian community resembled a factory where, through the use of hydraulic energy, grain was ground, flour was sifted, and fabrics were produced, and hides were tanned. As Jim Gimple points out, this chronicle could have been written a total of 742 times, as many Cistercian monasteries existed in Europe in the 12th century. They all likely experienced the same degree of technological progress. As noted by Gimple, the diffusion of machines in Europe during the Middle Ages reached a level unprecedented until then by any civilization. According to another study, monks were the skilled and unpaid technical advisors of their times in the Third World, that is, post-barbarian invasion of Europe. It goes on to say, there was no activity, whether it be extraction or processing of salt, lead, iron, alum, gypsum, of marble, cutlery, glassmaking, or the forging of metal sheets, where the monks did not display all the creativity and the fertile spirit of inquiry. They developed and refined their work to perfection, and their expertise spread through Europe. The monastic contribution to Western civilization is immense, as we have seen. Among other things, monks taught metallurgical techniques, introduced new crops, copied ancient texts, preserved education, pioneered in technology, invented champagne, improved the European landscape, provided well-being to travelers, and cared for the lost and shipwrecked. Is there anyone in the history of Western civilization who can boast of having such a resume? The Jesuits now. The Jesuits' contribution to the advancement of seismology has been so substantial that the discipline is sometimes referred as the Jesuit science. Odenbach implemented his project a year later with the acquisition of 16 seismographs, each of which was installed at a university. Each seismographic station collected its own data and sent it to the central headquarters in Cleveland. The data were then transferred from Cleveland to the International Seismological Center in Strasbourg. Thus, the Jesuit Seismological Service was born, described as the first seismological network established on a continental scale with uniform instrumentation. Now, in astronomy, the observatories of the cathedrals proved essential for the advancement of scientific research. Between 16, between 1655 and 1736, astronomers conducted around 4,500 observations at St. Petronium. However, as pointed out by Gerald Rayburn from the University of Berkeley, California, the Roman Catholic Church has provided more financial assistance and social support for the study of astronomy over 6 centuries, from the recovery of ancient knowledge throughout the Middle Ages to the Enlightenment, than any other institution, and probably more than all others combined. Now, regarding architecture, the scholars of Chartres, as explained by Robert Scott, believed that geometry was a way to establish a link between humans and God, that mathematics was a vehicle to reveal to humanity the most intimate secrets of the heavens. They thought that the harmony of music was based on the same rules that shaped the cosmic order, and that the cosmos was a work of architecture emerging from the hand of God. And we can see, for example, the Salisbury Cathedral and the St. Remy Basilica. We can see the beauty of the architecture and the harmony of the art. Around the 4th century, the church began sponsoring the creation of large-scale hospitals, so that nearly every major city had a healthcare center. Initially, these hospitals provided shelter for foreigners, but they also cared for the sick, widows, orphans, and the poor in general. With the fall of the Roman Empire, monasteries became providers of organized medical care for centuries, a service not available elsewhere in Europe, both in operation and location. These institutions were genuine havens of order, piety, and stability, where healing took place. In order to cultivate these practices, monasteries also transformed the centers of medical knowledge between the 5th and the 10th centuries. The classical period so-called monastic medicine emerged in the Carolingian Renaissance of the 7th century as major centers for the study and transmission of ancient medical texts. Now, this is very important. This philosophical reflection by the Spanish theologians ultimately led to a significant achievement, the birth of modern international law. The controversies surrounding the indigenous peoples of the Americas provided the opportunity to establish the general principles that states were morally obliged to observe in their mutual relationships. In light of the dramatic accounts of the behavior of the Spaniards arriving from the New World, the king convened a group of theologians and jurists with the task of developing laws that the Spanish officials were to follow in their relationship with the indigenous people. This led to the creation of the laws of Burgos and Valladolid. Among the most illustrious of these thinkers was Father Francisco de Vitoria, who, through his own criticism of Spanish politics, laid the foundations of modern international law theory. At times, he has been referred to as the father of international law, the man who first formulated international law in modern terms. With the support of other Jewish theologians, Victoria defended the doctrine that all men are free and based on this natural freedom proclaimed the right to life, to culture, and property. Now, all of this progress was because of Christianity or despite of Christianity. Well, I will not present a Christian theologian to answer that, but I will present the Antichrist, none other than Nietzsche himself. Our faith in science still rests on a metaphysical faith. Even we, the knowledgeable ones of today, the irreligious, the anti-metaphysicians, continue to draw our inspirations from the flame ignited by a faith that spans thousands of years, the faith of the Christians, which was also the faith of Plato, that God is truth, that the truth is divine. But what if precisely this becomes increasingly unbelievable when nothing seems to be divine except error, blindness, and falsehood? What if God Himself turns to be our oldest lie?